Hi everyone, I'm just waiting for the stream to start up. I'm never quite sure exactly when it starts, and then at the beginning of a video, I'm usually just staring at the screen for a bit, but I will assume that the stream has started. My name is Elizabeth Voss. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Disobedient Media. I'm so grateful that you're here with me today, and I am going to be reading another one of my articles. I provide these articles in this audio format and video format because I want people to be able to listen to them if they don't have time to read. And people that may have not have heard of Disobedient Media when we wrote some of these articles may be interested in some of our older content as well. So I'm going to be reading another relatively old article. It's called Zoe's Ark and the Blurred Lines Between Humanitarian Aid and Exploitation. I published this article in July last year, but it's not time sensitive. This isn't like a breaking news story. It's more of an analysis piece, so it's still relevant. And I'll just get right into it. So it begins. Where is the line between humanitarian aid and exploitation? Cases like the Zoe's Ark scandal, the Silsby scandal, and others provide a troubling picture of war-torn, disaster-stricken areas, creating situations ripe for abuse by NGOs and other charitable groups that severely lack public or governmental accountability. These cases raise the question of transparency in aid work and suggest that issues in this area have been ongoing in different regions for some time. To get an idea of how relevant this issue is currently, Russia Today published an article just yesterday, and this was obviously yesterday being last year at the time of writing. Russia Today published an article revealing that more than 100 missing refugee children in Calais may have become victims of sex trafficking. Julian Assange has also questioned the legitimacy of Bono's One Foundation, calling it a special ops match made in heaven. Elizabeth Lee Beck, a Yale-educated litigator in the DNC4 lawsuit, appeared in a bombshell interview with alternative media website InfoWars, where she referenced issues that had come up in her own research in regards to the death of Peter Smith, Buranton Weisenot, and others. Given these developments, it is especially timely to take a closer look at scandals like Zoe's Ark and ask why, after over a decade, the issues stemming from these cases have not been fully addressed. The 2007 Zoe's Ark scandal was one of the first of a string of NGO-related cases of misconduct, which resulted in accusations from the president of Chad that the NGO had been intending to sell the children to human trafficking and organ trafficking networks. Despite the members of the charity receiving convictions on charges of child trafficking and receiving sentences of 8 years hard labor in Chad, the accused were repatriated to France after the intercession of Nicolas Sarkozy. Sarkozy personally persuaded Idriss Déby to give the offenders presidential pardons. The group later faced related charges in France, but much lesser charges, much lesser sentences. Charity involvement in child and organ trafficking is a concerning issue. These concerns were repeated in 2010, this time in Haiti with the Laura Silsby child trafficking debacle. The accusations against Silsby mirrored similar comments made by the Prime Minister of Haiti in an interview with CNN, where he accused American NGOs of removing children for the express purpose of selling them to pedophilia and organ trafficking rings. Former French Minister of Foreign and European Affairs and founder of Doctors Without Borders, Bernard Kouchner, bridges these cases in some respects and casts additional light on the concerning lack of transparency that NGOs enjoy and the corruption that has consistently resulted in these chaotic conditions. Zoe's Ark, also known as L'Ark de Zoe, and Children's Rescue, was registered as an NGO with the French government in 2004 in the wake of the Asian tsunami. The charity's leader, Eric Berteau, soon turned the group's attention towards the conflict in Darfur. The 2007 incident that resulted became infamous when it was revealed that members of the organization, including its founder, had intended to sell the children for thousands of euros each to French families. The BBC reported that the children recovered from Zoe's Ark were healthy, specifying that the children were not being treated for any serious illnesses or injuries, and that is a really important point, and the article gets into it a little bit later on. According to NBC, Zoe's Ark workers had presented the children as ill and injured by applying bandages to non-existent wounds. This suggested that Zoe's Ark workers had intentionally faked injuries on the bodies of healthy children, possibly to hide their identity and origin. Furor was heightened when it emerged that most of the children recovered from Zoe's Ark originated from areas not involved in the Darfur conflict. The vast majority of those children were between the ages of 3 and 5 years old, with several infants, including several infants. Zoe's Ark described their motivations as altruistic, despite admitting that they had planned to circumvent African and European adoption laws in order to remove the children. That the charity would take children with living relatives from a location that was not involved in the Darfur conflict and then intentionally create an appearance of injuries in order to further misconstrue the children's origin is deeply disturbing and raises serious concerns regarding the NGO's intentions. Outrage surrounding the scandal intensified when it was revealed that the 103 children recovered from the charity represented only a tiny fraction of the total number of children the charity had planned to remove under such controversial circumstances. According to the Berkeley Center for Peace, Religion, and World Affairs, Zoe's Ark had intended to remove as many as 10,000 children from the area during this single operation in Chad. The wealth that Zoe's Ark would have gained from removing 10,000 children is truly mind-boggling. French citizens were reported to have been prepared to pay thousands of euros, up to 11,000 American dollars per child. So multiply 11,000 US dollars by 10,000 children. That's the amount of money that Zoe's Ark would potentially have made if this scandal had not been brought to light. 6 Zoe's Ark workers were charged with acting illegally as an adoption intermediary, facilitating illegal entry into France, and fraud in regards to the hundreds of families who had expected to adopt children who were actually orphans. Despite receiving presidential pardons in Chad, members of the charity were eventually convicted on related charges in France. During these French proceedings, Zoe's Ark leader Eric Bouchot was described by a witness as a, quote, powerful manipulator. In addition to the legal charges, serious accusations were leveled at Zoe's Ark by Chad's president, Idriss Déby. He stated that some of the children would face a darker fate than being sold at a very high price to French families in illegal adoptions. The BBC reported Déby's statement, quote, and this is the president of Chad that made this statement at the time, quote, their aim is to kidnap the children from their parents, to steal the children from their parents, and to sell them to pedophile organizations in Europe, and even to perhaps to kill them and sell their organs. And I'm, stepping back from that a second, that is a huge statement to make, and it is from the president of the country that these children were taken from. So back to the article. Déby's allegations echoed sentiments expressed by Haiti's Prime Minister Jean-Max Bellerive. I'm trying to pronounce that correctly. Bellerive. In the wake of the Silsby scandal. Less than a month after Silsby and her associates were arrested in Haiti on charges of child trafficking, Bellerive told CNN that organ trafficking of children and adults was taking place in the country due to demand for, quote, all types of organs. His statement specified groups participating in this activity included NGOs taking children to the United States, a possible allusion to the Silsby case, in the same breath that he described organ and child trafficking. The intervention of French President Nicolas Sarkozy on behalf of Zoe's Ark only serves to increase speculation surrounding the event. Der Spiegel reported that Sarkozy flew Spanish flight attendants and 3 French journalists back from Chad in his official jet on the same day that he met with Chad's president. According to Time magazine, those flown back to France by Sarkozy had been under investigation in Chad at the time of their repatriation. So Sarkozy's intervention fueled controversy in Chad. The Guardian reported that Zoe's Ark charity had enjoyed the backing of Cecilia Sarkozy. So that was awkwardly worded, but the point there was that the Guardian reported that there were claims made in Chad that Nicolas Sarkozy's I believe then wife, had backed Zoe's Ark, which would have been a major scandal if that had been confirmed. Sarkozy's intervention in the Zoe's Ark debacle was echoed by Bill Clinton's intercession in the Laura Silsby scandal. As extensively reported by William Craddock of Disobedient Media, Silsby was caught in 2010 in the midst of an attempt to remove children, many of whom were revealed to have had living relatives, from Haiti under the guise of charitable efforts with the New Life Children's Refuge. Clinton was acting as the UN's special envoy to Haiti at the time, and his intervention in the Silsby scandal is one of his first official acts after arriving in the country. And so my point there was that mirrored the direct intervention of Sarkozy in the Zoe's Ark scandal. Questions raised by the Zoe's Ark and Silsby scandals regarding human and organ trafficking were fueled by connections in both incidents to Bernard Kouchner. In the Zoe's Ark incident, French Secretary of State and Foreign Affairs and Human Rights Rama Yade oversaw aspects of the case and served at the time under Kouchner. The Guardian reported that Kouchner also personally contacted Idriss Deby during the Zoe's Ark debacle to express solidarity with the children. Kouchner has also showed great interest in serving in Haiti in a UN role. Shortly after the Silsby scandal, a 2011 email exchange between Hillary Clinton, Milan Verveer, and Cheryl Mills, published by WikiLeaks, stated that Kouchner was considering a position as UN Special Representative to Haiti. The exchange reads in part, I saw him, and this is to Hillary, and it states, and the subject of the email is Bernard Kouchner, and if you read the article, you can see the screenshot of this email from WikiLeaks publication of the, I believe it was the, just the Hillary Clinton emails. I'm not sure exactly, but anyway, you can click on the link directly to that email if you like. But I'm going to read out the content of it, and it says, quote, I saw him at the memorial, and it's talking about Bernard Kouchner. So they saw Bernard Kouchner at the memorial, and he has expanded since that he's told Ban Ki-moon that he will take the job of UN Special Rep. And I apologize for that awkwardness. That's just the way the email is worded. He will take the UN job of UN Special Rep for Haiti if he can work on a common strategy and platform with you, Hillary Clinton, your husband, Bill Clinton, and Paul Farmer. He wants to meet with Perez C. in New York and is willing to come to DC whenever suitable for you to discuss with you. The email specified that Kouchner would agree to the position as special envoy to Haiti only if he worked with Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and Paul Farmer. Farmer served under Bill Clinton during his tenure as UN Special Envoy to Haiti. Kouchner's interest in serving as special envoy to Haiti in close partnership with the Clintons is also significant due to the Clintons' deep involvement with humanitarian efforts that have been marred by a number of corruption allegations in Haiti. The role Kouchner considered in Haiti would have mirrored previous humanitarian service in Kosovo, where he was head of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo, or UNMIK, during the conflict. During this time, Kouchner acted as the personal representative of then Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan. His term in Kosovo coincided with numerous scandals related to human and organ trafficking, which some press reports indicated had tarnished his reputation personally. Kouchner is not only a prominent political figure with close ties to the Clintons and their associates, he has personally co-founded NGOs and charitable organizations with close ties, including Doctors Without Borders, again illustrating the blurred boundaries that are associated with humanitarian aid. Kouchner was also known for his testimony offered in defense of Michael Sounelé, who was eventually convicted on charges of pedophilia. Media reports described Kouchner's vigorous defense testimony provided in Sounelé's behalf against pedophilia charges in Romania. Despite Kouchner's testimony, the 67-year-old humanitarian aid worker was eventually convicted on charges of sexual perversions and corruption of minors. Kouchner's defense of Sounelé provides another concerning example of the murky boundaries between aid groups and allegations of abuse. Sounelé served as a humanitarian aid worker in his own right, specifically with Doctors Without Borders, the group which Kouchner had co-founded. French media outlet Libération, I don't know how to pronounce that, I apologize, they reported that Kouchner had called Sounelé's work a, quote, model for international bodies. So Kouchner had provided defense testimony on behalf of an alleged pedophile who was eventually convicted. And not only that, but Kouchner had referred to that pedophile's work as a model for international bodies. And this is all reported in French press. You can go read it yourself. I've linked to the article that discusses this particular case. that he praised Sonolé's work raises serious questions as to the delineation between NGOs and those who participate in such groups that are then accused of abuses, and the intercession for the accused by prominent political figures who often have close ties to the NGOs in question. And I want to add as a side note, because this was published a very long time before we published the later work on Greg Bucciaroni's story, but I just want to point out one parallel to this particular article, which is that Bucciaroni told us that there was a very strong connection between philanthropy and philanthropic organizations, and those organizations being used as a cover to access vulnerable children. So I think that there is a similar dynamic going on here that is evidenced in what I'm talking about. So anyway, back to the article. Sonolé's history prior to the pedophilia allegations that arose in Romania were also alarming. Le Parisien reported that Sonolé had spent 35 years of a life sentence in French prison after being convicted on charges of armed robbery. So, ignoring the pedophilia allegations for one moment, Kushner was praising the work of a convicted armed robber who had spent 35 years of a life sentence in French prison. I don't know why any political figure would praise that type of a person. French press also reported that while incarcerated, Sonolé had made contact with a Colombian drug trafficking cartel. Despite this history, Sonolé had participated in humanitarian aid efforts in locations including Rwanda, where he looked for survivors of the families of 200 orphans. He organized the placement of those children, and he photographed them. Sonolé was reported to have also expressed admiration for Jean-Louis Mathurin, who served as the first president of Kushner's Doctors Without Borders until 1996. Kushner's defense of a convicted pedophile who'd worked for an NGO he founded raised serious concerns regarding why such a person was allowed to work for an aid group in the first place, much less defended by its co-founder. Mathurin was not the only president of an NGO that Kushner co-founded, which hired an employee convicted of sex crimes against minors. Mathurin had worked with Bernard Kouchner as a consultant at the French Ministry of Health, leading several missions in the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, notably in Albania and Kosovo in the late 90s, where he worked with French military and international corps. This took place at the time that Kouchner was serving as the personal representative of UN Secretary General Kofi Annan as head of the UN efforts in Kosovo. CNN reported in 1999 that a UN human rights official stated that human rights abuses had occurred in the presence of UNMIK, which Kouchner headed when he served as head of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo. That is a lot of effort to pronounce that. Anyway, during the conflict, CNN reported that based on statements made by Dick Marty, who called for further investigation into claims that the KLA under Hashim Thasi's leadership had participated in organ trafficking. The Guardian wrote in 2010 that Kosovo's prime minister is the head of a mafia-like Albanian group responsible for smuggling weapons, drugs, and human organs through Eastern Europe. And so again, you have this allegation of organ trafficking coming up around these UN and paramilitary efforts. These strongly worded claims were made in a Council of Europe report that relied in part on information from the FBI and other intelligence sources. NBC stated that Kosovo had responded to the publication of the report with threats of legal action. And again, I just want to back up for a moment, and I know that the statements that are being made in this article sound like off the charts ridiculous, but every single thing that I'm stating is backed up and cited in a legacy press report on these subjects. So if you're interested in finding out more and validate and verifying for yourself what I'm talking about in this article, please read it and please look at the articles that I've cited, because you can get a lot more information that way, and that would validate what I'm saying. So the Guardian also discussed an internal UN document that described UN forces in Kosovo committing illegal acts and recruiting from the KLA, which, as we have seen, was reported to have been a mafia-like group with connections to organized crime. They wrote, "The UN's own damning verdict on its newly created civil defense force is fresh evidence of the failure of Special Representative Bernard Kouchner, Once again, it's such admonishments of UN forces, even by the UN's own evaluation, sends a clear message that the current level of oversight in humanitarian efforts is severely lacking. The KPC under Kushner was a UN-backed, UN-funded civil defense corps. It was manned by high-ranking members of Thasi's KLA. This was exemplified by General Agim Keku, who was formerly a senior commander of the KLA, who then served as the leader of the KPC. Keku was personally accused in an internal UN document of supervising a forced prostitution racket, among other abuses. The Guardian wrote that KPC had received £30 million in aid budget from Kosovo, or for Kosovo, from the UN. Such blurred boundaries were implied once again when Serbian media reported that Kushner reacted angrily to accusations from political officials or police officials claiming that Kushner must have had knowledge of documented organ trafficking. Even with UN backing, the KPC was accused of participation in serious human rights abuses. The Guardian reported that the KPC had participated in mafia-like activities themselves, including murder, torture, and sex trafficking networks. Once again, the line between humanitarian intermediaries and perpetrator of exploitation seems to have become particularly clouded. Disobedient media previously reported on human trafficking scandals stemming from the conflict in Kosovo, particularly those perpetrated by UN peacekeepers and paramilitary groups hired by the UN, such as DynCorp. And this is why I'm doing these articles back to back. The BBC reported that Amnesty International had published a report which described UN peacekeepers fueling demand for sex trafficking as well as sometimes participating in the trafficking networks in the Kosovo area. That groups like Amnesty International, UN internal documents, and Dick Marty via the Council of Europe would all raise such serious concerns is alarming. It paints a very clear picture, in light of the later Zoe's Ark and Silsby scandals, of aid work and exploitation too often going hand in hand with abuses taking place under the unfortunate protection provided by a severe lack of accountability and sometimes diplomatic immunity associated with the UN. In these extensively documented allegations that illustrate a severe lack of government oversight, which has created an environment where perpetrators of human rights abuses and aid efforts have become almost impossible to distinguish during disaster relief and serious conflicts, where the conditions are often already chaotic and largely unregulated. The case raises the important issue of the often blurred boundaries between abusers and aid workers. In the case of Zoe's Ark, the potential removal of 10,000 healthy children with relatives from areas not affected by the Darfur conflict begs the deeply disturbing question. If this is what was caught, then what abuses are occurring that we do not catch? And that is the end of that article. I apologize that I stumbled a couple of times reading that. I don't usually do that, even with my Decipher You streams with Susie. That doesn't usually happen, but it is what it is. And I hope that the video wasn't too choppy. If it was, I'll try to address that once again. And I appreciate you sticking with me through this very long article. You can find me at Elizabeth, Leavos on Twitter. You can find Disobedient Media at Disobedient News on Twitter. Please visit our website. Please read this article. And if you're skeptical of the things that I was saying in this article, please click on the source links and investigate it yourself. It's a really huge topic, and I don't think that it's given enough media attention, and it hasn't been given enough media attention over the years. I will be right back to do, after this video, to do another couple of articles before I call it a night, so continue watching if you'd like. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.